Before we start learning how to make a graph on Microsoft Excel, there's three important questions that we need to consider. First, have I collected enough data points? Secondly, do I need to consider significant figures? And third, did I correctly identify the independent and dependent variable? So first of all, have you collected enough data points to be able to define a relationship or draw a conclusion? Second question, do I need to consider significant figures? So that kind of depends on the level of experimentation you're doing or your teacher's preferences. As a quick rule of thumb, whichever value that you um, collect from the lab that has the least amount of significant figures, that's the amount of significant figures you want to report out. And lastly, and most importantly, identifying the independent and dependent variable correctly. Your independent variable is the variable that you have physically controlled and manipulated directly throughout the experiment. And the dependent variable is the variable that you are measuring the results of to see if and how it responded to the independent variable. Okay, so make sure you consider those three things. And then after you have, then you're ready to get into graphing your data. All right, so now we're ready to start our graph with Microsoft Excel. What we're going to do is put in two columns of data. It doesn't really matter necessarily where you put them. People typically start in the top left-hand corner, as will I. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to title the top of each of my columns of data, and then I'm going to fill in my numbers. All right, so I filled in my two columns of data, and I have my little titles up top here with the units, time in seconds, and velocity in meters per second. Time would be my independent variable because I controlled exactly how much time I wanted to let something fall for, and then the velocity was recorded after 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and so on, and that's in meters per second. So what I'm going to do is hold my mouse down, highlight my two columns of data, and then from there, you're going to click Insert up top. You could click Recommended Charts. I would say typically for a scientific graph, you're going to click right in the middle bottom over here where it says Insert Scatter. I'm going to click the very first one in the top left-hand corner so that it doesn't connect my points. And then what it's going to do is it's going to give me my chart. And then I'm going to click on this green plus sign to make sure I have all the chart elements that I want. So far, it has included the axes, chart title, and grid lines. In addition, I want axis titles, and I also want a trend line. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to properly label everything before I get to my final steps. All right, so I have everything titled. I have my main title of my graph, which is velocity versus time. It's always the dependent variable versus the independent variable. On the side, along my y-axis, I always place my dependent variable on the side, which is my velocity in meters per second, so I can see how it fluctuates vertically. And then along the bottom, I have time, which is the independent variable that I control that is measured in seconds. Okay, for my last step, I'm going to click on the plus sign again to pull this up. And from trend line, I'm going to hit this little arrow that's going to give me some more options. Okay, I would either go with linear or linear forecast if you're talking about a linear relationship. Obviously, if you have a different relationship, that's what you pick. It is pretty common that you'll get some sort of linear relationship. Linear forecast is sort of nice because it extrapolates your line a little bit, so it's all dependent on your preference. I'll just go with linear for now. And then I'm going to click more options. And here's the part where you get some of your most important data. I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom over here, and I'm going to click Display Equation on Chart and Display R-squared value. I'm going to click this and close this out. And then I'll take those values. I'll usually just drag them into a blank space over here so they can more clearly be seen on my chart. And now you have some of your most important data here. You have your slope. Your slope is 10.107. And then you have your y-intercept, which is 0.486. And then you also have your r-squared value, which is 0.9977. Okay, so that concludes how to make a graph on Microsoft Excel. Thank you for watching and listening.